Today, I'm inviting you to head off with me to my old summer stomping ground, the Irish countryside, for a reading of poetry, more particularly haibun. We're going to meet the poet and farmer Jeremy Haworth and listen to the poems he wrote while he was learning his farming craft. You might notice once or twice my accent changes to the twang of my early years. Blink though and you'll miss it. Hello, I'm Patricia and this is the Poetry Pea, taking you for a visit to Ireland. But before we make our preparations, get our rain jackets and our wellies on, I have a couple of reminders for you. The first is to listen to the podcast before this one. That's episode 23 of the 7th series, and the one that follows this one, episode 25. There's a very good reason for this. Not just that I worked quite hard on them, but our next reading period is Senryu, and they're going to help you get to grips with the topic in time for our next reading period. At least I hope they will. Thanks to everyone who took part in the flash coup this month. Results will be with you imminently, and of course, the successful poets will be featured on the podcast and in the Poetry Pea Journal. My thanks to the editing team for all their work. The usual suspects, Ron Craig, Vandana Parashar, Liam Maguire, Linda Ludwig, and Robert Horrobin. But we were all joined by two new members of the team, Lev Hart and Matt Diffiebull. Now, you all know how difficult I find the pronunciation of Matt's name, so be prepared for an amazing selection of pronunciations as his editorship proceeds. Thank you to all of the team. It was a joy working with you as always. Sad not to have Lorraine, but she's gone on to do other things. Good luck, Lorraine. Now, of course, some of you won't know what I'm talking about when I talk of the flash coup, which means you're not on the mailing list or you haven't been reading my emails. Either way, do make sure you're signed up so you can take part in the next one. Or maybe just read the mails I send you. Bless. Now, I'm going to let Jeremy take us right to the end of the podcast today. And so I do need to remind you that Poetry Pea relies on your sponsorship. And you can sponsor us by purchasing a membership or buying us a coffee. Both can be done at Buy Me a Coffee, and you can get there by heading to our website and clicking certain things. And of course, with membership, there are benefits for you as well as me. It would be lovely if you could do that. Take a bit of the pressure off me. So like I said, we're going to Ireland today. And I bet when I previewed that news in a previous podcast, you thought, oh, goody, Sean O'Connor's back. Well, not this time, although he will be back in the not too distant future. But as I've already said, today's Irish poet is Jeremy Haworth. Fear not, though, Sean is not that far away. He wrote the introduction for Jeremy's book. And he says in the intro, in Four Season Farm, Jeremy Haworth's writing is skilled, deliberate, and accomplished. It is honest, humble, and refreshing, written in a clear and original voice. Four Season Farm is a remarkable debut and a delightful read. We're going to find out about Jeremy as we go along, but here are some of the things we don't find out in the chat. He was originally from an Irish seaside town, the town of Bray. Perhaps some of you have visited it. I haven't, but I hear good things about it. And in 2019, he won the Cúirt New Writing Prize. You can visit him at his website, and of course, there'll be links to his book and the website in the show notes. So without further ado, let's go meet Jeremy and hear about life on the farm. It's not always a bed of roses. Jeremy, welcome to Pea Towers, and thank you so much for coming along today and reading to us.
Thank you, Patricia, for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Well, I expect it'll be a real pleasure. We haven't started yet, so let's see. Before we get into your little treasure of a book, Four Season Farm, tell us, Jeremy, tell us about the farm that inspired this book of haibun.
So I spent 9 months working with a farmer on a farm based just outside a small village called Ballator, which is in County Kildare, the county next to Dublin, on the island of Ireland where I live. So I worked there for 9 months with no background experience in organic horticulture, none whatsoever, bar some background gardening. So I worked there for 9 months, and that's where I cut my teeth and learned the craft of organic growing.
So, do I gather that, well, let's ask you, before you went off and on this apprenticeship, what experience did you have in farming of any description?
None. Well, I married a farmer's daughter, so that's where we are now. We're based in Laois, not in the Irish Midlands. That's where my wife's ancestral farmstead is, which is where we're now living. Um, but prior to the apprenticeship, my experience was really as wide as the small plot I kept in our suburban back garden in South Dublin. But I was always a keen gardener. I mean, I've always been very attracted to the natural world, and it was that attraction really that drew me towards the work I now do on a full-time basis. So in order to get where I am now, so we started our own market garden here in Laois. And we took on an overgrown wood garden and an overgrown vegetable garden, long overrun. It had been left to go to seed for many moons. And in 2019, we began our own market garden. But in order to get from the suburban back garden to our current flourishing market garden, the middle step was the 9 month apprenticeship I did with a gentleman, a farmer called Liam, a renowned local grower who had been farming at Moyle Abbey Farm for over 2 decades. And I joined him, and as I say, I was very green and very wet behind the ears when I started. Um, but over the course of that 9 month period, I learned the basic skills I needed to start Caris Garden, which is our own current market garden where we live here in County Laois.
So, Jeremy, I was going to ask before I knew that you were green, sort of wet behind the ears when you started in your apprenticeship. I was going to say to you, people have an idea that living on the land is sort of living and working on the land is sort of idyllic. And I wonder, what were you thinking? Did you have some idea of what you were getting into because you were married into a farming family, as it were? Or what did you do? Did it come as a huge surprise to you what you'd let yourself in for?
No, I mean, I had some experience, over the years when I'd visit the farm where we're now living. I mean, there was a good amount of forestry work I would assist with. Um, and there was always maintenance work, mending fences, all of that stuff that goes along with farming life, mending, looking after clapped out tractors and cutting firewood and so on and so on. But yes, I mean, and I found like I had a natural affinity for that type of work. Um, the The way of life I had in Dublin before I started the apprenticeship was quite sedentary. It was very relational, but it would be sedentary at times. I'd spend long hours at the desk. Um, and I began, there was kind of a natural hunger involved in my own self to put my body to work, kind of an animal hunger to be in the elements. And as I say, I always enjoyed gardening. So I started with a small plot in our back garden in South Dublin where we were living at the time. And I mean, there's something um, deeply satisfying. There's an elemental satisfaction in putting your hands into the soil and smelling the rain, and something, deeply, deeply spiritual, I think, about putting a seed in the soil, and the invisible processes, invisible to our eyes at least, um, that pop that seed into life, and you can watch the plant emerge. And if you can feed yourself from that plant, it's doubly satisfying because you're taking it back into your own body and nourishing uh, your own self, and the life of your own family around the kitchen table. So you know being a full-time market gardener, and thinking back also to my experience as an apprentice grower with Liam at Moyle Abbey Farm, um, it is hard work. I think it tests the mind and the body to its limits. Nature is never static; it's always moving. You're interfacing with every kind of creature, from the microscopic right up to the larger variety of furred mammal, toothy rats, and on it goes. And there's cattle here that surrounds our own garden, and they've been known to break in on occasion. So we also keep bees, which find their way into my hair on a busy summer day. Um, and so in this kind of frenetic dance of nature that you're in the midst of, um, as you're trying to grow the crops that earn your keep, um, you're working hard, particularly in the seasonal sprint of summer. When you're watering crops and harvesting crops and so on. So it's hard graft. Uh, Having said that, it is immensely satisfying. What we do doesn't bring in a vast wage, but it more than pays for itself in spades in terms of the satisfaction it brings to body and mind. So is it an idyllic existence? I don't know. I don't know that I'd call it idyllic, but I'd certainly call it wholesome, uh, if that's the start of an answer to your question.
It's a pretty good start. And I
Yeah.
should ask, actually, we don't know what you did in Dublin. What were you sitting at your desk doing in Dublin before you came out to the
Well, I was in pastoral work.
Okay.
I was in it. It was akin to chaplaincy work. I was working with students, university campuses, and prior to that, I was a training pastor in a busy city centre church.
Mhm.
So there was a desk work element in it. There was a lot of, as I say, it was also very relational work. But my master's thesis in theology was a dialogue with a Lutheran theologian called Wolfhard Pannenberg, and an Anglican theologian by the name of N.T. Wright. And my master's thesis looked at the stuff of earth, really. And it looked at the status and destiny of creation as something, um, uh, you know, that has been brought into being by God, but what is it destined for? And what is the status of matter itself? When we put on the lens of Christian theology, we try to think through how is it that we should steward the earth we walk on, and how do we lovingly interact with it? It's a burning question today, obviously, when so much of the planet has been ravaged by Western civilization. Much of it built on the Judeo-Christian framework, for so long taken for granted. But anyway, that master's thesis really fed a hunger to be in the elements and to put my hands in the soil and smell the rain, and also to try to, in some way, develop a local small-scale garden that could join in with the rural economy and feed local people, and in that way offer people an alternative to the supermarket variety of veg that travels so far and leaves such a gigantic carbon footprint. So all of those factors kind of fed in together to take us to the present moment. What we also host individuals here in the garden. So what we do is we grow for local people who pick up a box of weekly produce from the veg shed, which is our pickup point here in the garden, or they go to a local pub in the nearest town each Thursday evening, O'Brien's pub in Mackay. So we're growing for local people, but what we also do is we welcome people living with long-term mental health issues or disability to join us in the garden a day a week, and that's another way that we connect with the wider community. And those individuals who come to us experience the health-giving impact of being immersed in nature and undertaking, the routine tasks of cleaning out the chicken run, or collecting the eggs, or weeding a bed, or at the moment we're sowing seeds. It's spring is the time for sowing. So that kind of gives an all-round picture of what we're doing here at Cúirt Garden.
So the people you invite in, I'm guessing it's not residential. It's just one day.
No. So these folks would be, a lot of them, at a residential centre. Yeah. So some of them would be living independently. Some of them would be in long-term care. So there's a variety of people who come to us, and that's arranged through an agency here in Ireland called Social Farming Ireland. So we partner with them, and they connect us then in turn to the various care centres and agencies who send the people to us.
So it's another way of connecting, I guess, with your local community as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. There's a lot to think about there. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Now, it would be really lovely to hear from Four Season Farm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut up and go away for a little while. Well, I'm not going very far. I'm going to sit and listen to you while you read to us from your wonderful book, Four Season Farm.
Thank you, Patricia. So my collection of haibun is entitled Four Season Farm, and it charts one man's struggle to learn the ancient art of tending the land. It tells a story of a single year on a busy organic farm here in Ireland, and so it takes the form of a diary, and each haibun is headed by a date. The diary spans the seasonal run from midwinter in January all the way through spring into summer, autumn, and back to winter, and closing just before the middle of December. January 9th. The feral cat came from Brennan's farm, an assassin, sleek and cold, piebald he-man, a pygmy lion. I saw him pounce a rabbit once, snap the spine, merge with the hedgerow, the dun pelt limp and bloody in his teeth. Now he is a wet clump in the nettle bed, mouth open to the rain, telltale prints in his flank. Yesterday the rubbish man owned up. Got snarled in my wheels, he said. Gathering light, the groove the cat left in the straw. January 19th. The sleeping farm. I pace the hard, frost-eaten earth. Nothing stirs in the silvered hedgerows. Wood smoke hangs in the air. The ceiling of the glass house is veined with ice. I imagine the dreaming hedgehog curled in a bed of leaves, wrens hugging in a nook of bark, the badgers dozing in their set. Time to rest. I unlatch the door and enter butter light, the warm fog in the farmhouse kitchen. A burst of applause, rising over the stubble, the pigeon flock. July 5th. The ancient Massey chokes into wakefulness. The engine rattles under its rusty hood. I've been entrusted with a rear-end loader full of cargo. My job is to transport a stack of crates and a young French volunteer to the far end of the farm. As we chug towards a hairpin bend, Leo tugs my sleeve. Please, you go slow. This one, bad corner. I shoot him a thumbs up. No worries, man. I got this. The tractor gears down to a crawl. I carefully snake the sharp corner. Thinking we're in the clear, I feather the accelerator. The rear tires bite into the incline. I ease the wheel to the left, rounding the last inches of the hairpin when, without warning, the gears grind up. The tractor lunges. I feel the full weight of the loader swing behind me. I instinctively throw a glance over my shoulder. The crates are present, but no Leo. I catch sight of two legs in the grass and realize he's been thrown out. I squeeze the brakes and turn to see him brushing leaves and twigs from his clothes. He is ruffled, but thankfully uninjured. I mumble an embarrassed apology. Declining the offer of another lift, he sets off determinedly on foot. I chug behind at a snail's pace, trying hard to quell the eerie feeling that I am sitting astride a haunted machine. The mare's breath, tumbling on the wind, ghost rodeo. July 19th. We greet the morning with the barber shop sound of snipping scissors. Lettuce, chrysanthemum greens, baby spinach, sorrel, summer purslane, snipped and gathered into blue plastic crates. The crates are transported to the washroom where the leaves are spilled out on the chrome surface of the tabletop. The haul weighs in at over 40 kilos. While this salad mountain is slowly mixed for bagging, I set off in search of petals to garnish the mix. Nasturtiums burn in a gleam of mid-morning sun. I pluck the fiery shades of orange, red and yellow. Nearby, cabbage white butterflies flit and bounce across a tight weave of netting, drawn by the mustard oil scent of the cauliflowers and their bulging cloudy heads, tucked safely beneath the mesh. Beyond the spiralling white wings is the sheep wire boundary, and further still, in the corner of the neighbouring field, half buried in a spinney of ash and evergreens, is the old farmstead. The cottage sinks in the overgrowth. Ivy climbs the gables. Maidenhair spleenwort and hart's tongue green the cracks in the limestone wall. Weathered slats of tin and rotting timber let the sky in. Through the doorway, in the dank half-light, there is a rusting plough and the press of cattle hooves deep in the dung-splotched earth. Children's laughter, hiding in the cow parsley, an old tin shed. August 23rd. First spell of rain for some time. We are grateful. Clomping around the farm in my wellies, I can hear the soft hiss of dry soil drinking down the sky. Rainy day, filling the puddle with sparrows. Thank you.
Jeremy, thank you very, very much for that reading. There were so many things that I wanted to talk to you about, but we haven't got all day, bless us. So a couple of things that occurred to me. I want to know the old tractor, the Massey Ferguson that you were you were dumping Leo unceremoniously
Yes.
off the back of. Was it one of the old grey ones, or were you something a bit more modern than that?
Yeah, it was an old red one, which I think is of a similar vintage to the grey ones, which I've also heard tell of. In fact, the publisher of the book, Kim Richardson of Alba Publishing, he had memories of a grey Massey Ferguson. But the Massey Ferguson on the farm was a red Massey Ferguson. It's vintage. I think it was manufactured sometime in the early 60s. It has a story to tell because Liam, the farmer I worked with, who's a legendary grower in his own right in the area. Many people know him. And he grew up. He was the son of a farmer in Tipperary, rural Tipperary, and he was the youngest of a number. I think maybe 5 or 6 children. He was the only son and the youngest at that. And he worked with his father on the farm, on his childhood farm. And this Massey Ferguson was the daily beast of burden he grew up with. And so his father left the tractor to him, and it made a journey then from rural Tipperary to Ballator, and has been at the heart of Moyle Abbey Farm, where I was serving my apprenticeship. It's been at the heart of the farm for many moons. But like an unwieldy young steed, myself and the tractor didn't always have the warmest of relationships, and I had a few issues with it. But it was part of the backdrop of the life of Moyle Abbey Farm. So that's I have to get the tractor in there somewhere.
Oh no, definitely. The reason I asked is the tractor on our old farm was the grey version.
Okay.
That was the first one that ever belonged to the farm. Before that tractor, it was horse and cart,
Yes.
or
Yes.
in our case, a donkey actually.
Okay.
So, so that sort of brought back memories. And then listening to you read August the 23rd, and you're saying first spell of rain for some time, I'm thinking,
Mm.
oh my, I used to spend my summers in Ireland, and I don't think I could ever say first spell of rain for some time.
Yes. Well, it's that's a good point. And we had a very wet year here last year, which is
Mhm.
normal. But that year I was serving the apprenticeship on the farm. It was a heat wave year. Um, it was 2018,
Mhm.
and it was remarkably hot.
Mm.
And that's reflected in the content of the book as we progress through the journal entries of Midsummer. Um, the heat and the drought actually becomes more and more pressing. And sure enough, that's true to my experience on the farm that year. And so when the rain finally fell, we all breathed a sigh of relief.
How would you be irrigating the crops up to that point?
Yeah, well, a lot of growers, you can rely on the rainfall
Mhm.
in Ireland by and large to irrigate. We get enough of it, but if it doesn't come at the right time, it can cause problems. So certain crops can be stressed and can bolt. And last year we lost cauliflowers for that reason. They button and they bolt, and you end up with a tiny head.
Mhm.
But what Liam had on the farm that year, we had long, again, they're mentioned in the book, long yellow drip pipes that ran along the drills and kind of drip fed water to the thirsty crops. So that got us out of a tight spot.
Yeah, amazing. And maybe it's time for me to come back to Ireland and enjoy a bit of sunshine for a change.
Absolutely.
Now I wanted to talk to you about January the 19th, which you started off with the sleeping farm. And
Mm.
you haven't. I read it and reread it, and I still at 1 second I think I know when it's set, what time of day it's set, and then I think, oh, that maybe I'm wrong. So you haven't made it easy for those of us who are proper city dwellers now to guess which end of the day you're at. Did you do that deliberately, or was it just that you're so used to your surroundings?
Well, it could be that. It's interesting you asked the question because it never occurred to me. I was thinking seasonally rather than
Okay.
chronologically. And the sleeping farm there is the winter sleep. Um,
Ah, okay.
it's that time when really everything browns off and settles, and you know, it's respite and
Hmm.
it's sleep, and the land seems to sleep. And many of the creatures are in a state of hibernation or semi-hibernation, and the fire is on, and the smell of wood smoke hangs in the cold air. So that's what I had in mind. However, I think as I reimagine myself into the moment, it's probably dusk. It's late
Oh,
afternoon.
okay.
I'm thinking rather than the morning. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, I mean, I'll go back and have another read, but actually that makes so much more sense. I'm thinking chronologically during the day, and I'm thinking, just of my own little small plot of land here, and I'm talking very small, and the frost and the ice, which are very familiar to me. But now you put it like that, totally makes sense. Thank you very much. And then the other thing I wanted to say about this, as you were constructing this haibun, were you thinking of the juxtaposition of the different sounds at the beginning and the end, the quiet and the loud, or was that just a happy coincidence, the whole process?
Yeah, that was actually a happy coincidence, and it's only when you again drew my attention to it, I realized that there was a natural build-up from silence to sound, and I think that was entirely unconscious on my part, and I see now it gives a flow to that particular high bun, which is very welcome. So thank you for pointing it out.
Okay, well, all your readers will have different
For sure.
reactions, won't they, to it? So that was what struck me about that one in particular. So now I want to go to July the 19th, which is obviously summer, and we get a glimpse of the crops you grow and sell during your apprenticeship. And this time there's a little nod to the modern at the beginning of your haibun when you mention the blue plastic crates, and then you juxtapose the modern with the old at the end in a sequence of prose and haiku that alludes to the old cottage, and then in a magnificent haiku dripping with sabi which speaks of the old tin shed. And when I talk of sabi, I'm thinking of what Martin Lucas describes as a tendency to favour imagery suggested of drabness and loneliness and melancholy. And I'd love for you to just read that haiku for us again, please, the one with
I'd
the
be
old tin
delighted.
shed.
Children's laughter, hiding in the cow parsley, an old tin shed. Children's laughter, hiding in the cow parsley, an old tin shed.
I don't know if it's just me, but it certainly brings me back to my childhood in Ireland, where I would visit my father's old family homestead, I suppose you'd call it, and all that was left of it was an old tin shed in the overgrown
Yes,
pastures.
that's right, and I think it's still, I'd say, a semi-ubiquitous sight, in Ireland, and there is that quilt work of farms still across the island, and some of them have grown larger over the years, but there are many farmsteads still today where there's often a modern bungalow and a working farm, and somewhere it could be immediately behind the new build, or it could be in the far corner of the farm. But there is that crumbling stonework that is sitting and slowly fading, and it's resonant with memory. And I think even if as a stranger you've no connection to the farmstead you might pass on the road as you're driving or as you're walking, you can sense um, the if you like, the after absence, or the memory of the people who would have lived there, and that's even though you're looking into maybe this briar tangled ruin dripping with rain, and the cattle are in and out and so on. But that's exactly what this haiku tried to reach for, was that sense of, as you put it earlier, that sense of sabi, that sense of sort of gloomy loneliness, that is still shot through with a soft light, as it were. So that's where that haiku came from, and it's just lovely to have the opportunity to read it here and to speak a little more about it.
No, it's lovely, as you say. It is quite still quite a common sight in Ireland, either that or the old tumbling cottages. I know on my mother's farm they have the modern bungalow and
Yes,
the old typical, the Irish cottage, the thatched Irish cottage with the three
yes.
rooms.
Oh
That is
wow,
now
yeah.
a modern buyer, which is breaks my heart every time I see the
Okay,
wretched thing.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
it.
but
They are beautiful, those old buildings.
oh,
And
beautiful.
where's your mother's farm?
There were both my mother and father are Leitrim people, so
Oh wow. Oh,
yeah,
of course. Oh, lovely.
they're
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they're up there, and
Awesome.
not so far. I mean, they live on what they call the mountain, whereas I now live in Switzerland. We call it like
Yes.
really. Um, so on the sort of the opposite mountain, they live in a valley. So looking across the valley, you can still see. I suppose you'd call them famine houses, or people that left houses at the crumbling of the people that left during the famine
Yes.
times,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's that's just heartbreaking as well when
Yes.
you wander
Yes.
there and see that sort of thing. And I think Dublin has actually Dublin and New York have two of the most heartbreaking famine monuments, I think, that I've
That's
ever
right.
visited.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Dublin, there's the sculpture of the emaciated family walking um, alongside the Liffey,
Mm.
carrying their meager um, burdens, their belongings towards what would have been maybe the getaway ship
I
as it
suppose,
was.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but mm, yeah, it's very, very poignant. Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
So thank you for that. You took me right
Oh,
back home for that one. So it was wonderful. So Jeremy, as I said in my intro, Sean speaks of this book of yours, Four Season Farm, as describing a world that is real and uncomfortable. And there are haibun in this book that I think the highly urban world in which I live in anyway, would people within that world would be extremely uncomfortable reading.
mm,
Now, we've spoken that I spend a lot of time on the farm in the summers, but I grew up in London with my sort of pampered pets, my cats and dogs. And I remember, much as I loved the summers in my grandparents' farm, there were times when their rural practices or their farming practices made me very uncomfortable, particularly the way that the sort of the animals on the farm were they were working animals, let's face it, and I wasn't used to animals that were working. Um, and you've given us in some pieces in this book, you've given us a real insight to maybe some of the aspects that would have made me uncomfortable back then, not so much now. Were you worried at all that you might offend sort of our urban city senses?
I don't know. Um, I think. Um, well, I should say. I want to say first of all. Actually, you mentioned Sean O'Connor there.
Mhm.
I want to say he is in large measure responsible for my entry into this form, and I'm incredibly grateful to him. And he's kind of nurtured a whole network of writers here in Ireland, as I'm sure you're aware. So thank you to Sean. Um, and back to your question. I suppose in a way I was aware on some level it might shock, but I suppose what I wanted to do was to bring, was to bring people into that place of encounter with a full-blooded creature who is living a story and is acting according to its intelligence
Mhm.
and has sensitivities on some level akin to our own. And what we have now on the farm as well, we've got two cats, and the cat, the mother cat, Cara, after the Irish word for friend, she arrived out of the blue. She was a wild cat, kind of semi-feral, and I started feeding her. And then, of course, the big wild, you know, tomcats with their John Wayne walk came in, and we ended up with three kittens, and they all turned out to be toms. But I found homes for two, and I kept one with brown eyes, named Morrison, after the brown-eyed girl Van Morrison. That's the connection. But these two cats as well, they hunt, and they're ferocious hunters, and they're part of this cycle, I suppose. But by having them here, it reduces the burden, if you like, on my shoulders to to um, to stem the tide of the rodents that come and go. But even those cats, they're working cats, but there's a deep bond there, and you know, they've been a remarkable, they brought a remarkable. They're wonderful to have around. I've often lifted one and just press it against. I lift Morrison and press his furry body to my face, just to hear his, the heart of the creature beating. And I suppose you're amongst nature in a very live wire sort of way. And anyway, it's all part of the mix, and they're working creatures, but I think, and they're not pets, as my wife reminds me constantly. But they become part of this live network of creatures that make a farm.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Now you see, that's the thing that as city dwellers we sometimes don't appreciate, that you're growing the food, but you have to protect that food somehow on occasion. So we don't get to see that bit. We just get to think of the lovely baby spinach growing and the nasturtiums amongst them, and then sitting on our plates that we've opened the packet and put the food on the plate. We don't see the bit in the middle where you've got to protect all that from the various things. And I was thinking about, as you were talking about the poisons and the raptors, I'm thinking about the slug pellets even in the garden that people use, and of course they have that affects the bird population as well, doesn't it? So it's not just the
That's right.
farmers that
Yeah,
are
that's right.
responsible. It's us
That's
too,
right. Yeah, it's a careful compromise. I think it's a hard one, but
yeah, it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
We shall see how I feel, because I'm converting part of my garden to a vegetable garden this year. So
Well done.
those slugs had better just behave themselves,
Yes. Well, I gather we don't have them here, but I gather ducks are very good for slug control. So you might
I
like
think
to put a duck or two in your
I
garden.
have two little ponds, but one of they could literally, a duck could just sit in them. So that would be. But anyway, Jeremy, before I ask you to read something that might well make us a little bit uncomfortable, you need to tell us, where can people get hold of this book? Where can they find this book and purchase it?
Of course, thank you. Yes, so copies of the book can be purchased through my website, which is www.jeremyhaworth.com, and there's a PayPal link um, on the page, on the book page. So that's one way it can be ordered. PayPal doesn't suit everyone. Not everyone has it. So in that case, it can be ordered via email.
I will put those in the
Okay,
show notes so
super,
they can get hold of those. That would be great.
fantastic. Thank you.
So, Jeremy, it's been a real pleasure talking
Well,
to
thank
you.
you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. It's a privilege and an honor. So thank you so much.
It really was. It was a joy to me too, because you took me back home to my childhood as well. So that was really very lovely. And we're going to test our viewers and listeners now, and their sensibilities, with a piece that I told you at the beginning. It made me a little bit uncomfortable. So let's ask our viewers and listeners to let us know what effect any of these haibun, but particularly this next one that we're going to hear, had on them as they listened or watched. So, Jeremy, You're going to finish our reading today with November the 24th, please.
November 24th. The rat claws the trapdoor, forces a dark muzzle through the bars, baring yellow teeth to the sun. Otherness, the other than human, the black otherworld in the eyes. I sink the cage into ice-cold water. Side to side the rat swims, slows, stops, curls inwards. Sharp forepaws together, the head slowly bows. The body shudders, stills. Autumn sundown, clarifying into stillness, the rat's tongue.